river filled back up, it was all I could do to keep my head out of the darkness of my own PTSD and not focus on my missing friend, so I focused on cleaning as much debris out of the river as I could, and at this point, I'd like to introduce you to the term nurdle. The basic building block of the plastic industry, the resin beads, plastic pellets, tiny microplastics 2 to 5 millimeters in size, which are moved about via vacuum hoses and transported via train cars, transport trucks, or shipping containers. Everything that is made out of plastic was once a plastic pellet, melted down in a hopper and injection molded into whatever shape their industry needed. I'll continue to call them nurdles, so called by Ian Conacher, who made the documentary called Addicted to Plastic that I watched and where this story stems from. In 2015, I scooped a large garbage bag of plastic pellets and compromised organic debris out of the Eramosa River and attempted to get Speed River paddling to take it to City Hall to find out where these things were coming from. I never heard anything back. So the next summer, with the demise of my friend and not being able to handle his loss, I set about to remove all the nurdles from the Eramosa River. The equivalent of 35 large garbage bags of pellets removed later, I'd begun to strike chords with environmentally minded people and friends, and my story started getting some traction. I was directed to the GRCA and the Ministry of Natural Resources, whom told me they had no power to do anything about what I was finding. In late August, I tagged Cam Guthrie and had his attention, and City Hall sent a couple employees in suits to walk along the Eramosa River's edge and look for the nurdles, but none were seen because they didn't know what they were looking for, nor were they allowed to get into the river as it has its own jurisdiction. Just when I thought I was about to get the mayor on board of this environmental story, his attention was stripped away by the 2016 Frosh Week antics of the University of Guelph students, who were more unruly and destructive than usual. My loss and the environment's loss. But alas, a friend whose father used to work at a chemical factory on the river told me about some fishy actions that used to go on there. They told me to try to contact the Ministry of the Environment. At about the same time, I went for a paddle with a landscaper friend of mine who told me that he was offered a job due to his various trailer licenses at a company that transports the same plastic pellets he was watching me scoop out of the river. The Ministry of the Environment was interested in meeting me, but the agent sounded like she was unsure that I knew what I was talking about. So before the meeting, I walked along the train tracks which cross the Eramosa River that leave a company called PDI at the Elizabeth Street location, and then further on along, it goes behind the Tim Hortons and VTR uniforms and crosses the Eramosa River, the train trestle. The train tracks come from the polymer distribution called PDI, which has multiple locations in town. The Elizabeth Street PDI location has huge silos with which hold tons of nurdles at a time, and trains run often to and from the location along the tracks near the plaza with Royal City Brewing VTR uniforms, and then behind the Tim Hortons at Victoria Street and York Roads, and then crosses the Eramosa River. While on the tracks, I brushed aside some railroad stones, and I could easily find nurdles. In no time, I had a small handful. I met with the agent, showed her the nurdles on the tracks, the nurdles in the in the river near the Victoria Street Bridge, and they also found some plastic powder on the railroad ties. The samples were scientifically cross-analyzed, and I was confirmed that PDI was guilty of allowing their product to get off-site and into the environment. December 30th, the KW Record did a front-page story on me that really got the ball rolling. So bravo. PDI was instructed to clean 3.5-kilometer stretch of the Speed and Eramosa rivers and install practices that would inhibit their nurdles from getting away. At this point, I'd like to inform you a little bit about what can happen with renegade microplastics. Firstly, they're often mistaken for food and eaten by wildlife. This is a fact. Aquatic life and fowl have been documented all over the world with bellies full of plastic. I'm sure you've seen news of whales or dolphins washing ashore with surprising amounts of plastic in them. Another documented aspect of nurdles is that oily toxins, such as fertilizers, insecticides, and gasoline, which could enter the river system through various storm drains or farm runoff, attach themselves or bind to these microplastics. This can make them toxic. This can also make wildlife which consumes them toxic. This is called bioaccumulation. As these toxins move up the food chain, the term is called biomagnification, and the top predators in the food chain are much more likely to become affected by the toxins. So, PDI cleaned the river in 2017 and were none too happy about me. A friend who was a professor of hydrogeology, whom I'd had as a confidant throughout the NERDL ordeal, said PDI probably spent over $100,000 on the cleanup. I was staying vigilant, pointing out where the collections of pellets remained to the MOE and keeping PDI in check. By this time, I'd been contacted by a lady named Fiona in a place called Skibbereen. She asked if she could share some of my #NERDLS photos, as their town was in a battle trying to stop an American thermoplastics company called RTP from building a factory there. I said, sure. Little did I know that it wasn't a small town in Northern Ontario. This was an historic town in County Cork, Ireland. Fiona asked if I'd be able to visit so as to help with their campaign, and I doubted I could, but my professor friend said he'd partially fund my trip if I were able to raise some money. And in the summer of 2018, I set off to Ireland to document what I had no idea would be the trip of my life. The people on the campaign were an assortment of incredibly smart, talented, and extremely famous and influential people. The Irish people of Skibbereen were small-minded and, under the guise of politicians, thought this thermoplastic factory would create much-needed jobs for their economy. In truth, this campaign was pointing out the lies in the development planning, lies in the pollution data, and the holes in the town's infrastructure to deal with a factory of such magnitude. The factory would only have 10 to 12 staff who'd be polymer specialists flown in to do the real work, and local jobs would be a couple of security staff. So the swindle was on. I documented my trip, interviewed key people involved, and made some great friends while I was there, while being interviewed a couple times on the subject of microplastics that could get into their environment. The Skibbereen economy is heavily dependent on things like fishing and mussel farming. I even brought a container of NERDLs, which were passed around at a special screening of Jeremy Irons' documentary called Trashed, and he was ever so thankful. I also brought another container of plastic pellets with me today for you guys to check out later on. The highlight of the trip was being filmed at Lord David Putnam's desk with his various movie awards behind me while interviewing Polly Higgins, whose main career goal was to get ecocide into international law, which would mean CEOs and shareholders of environmentally destructive companies would face jail time instead of paying fines for their pollution or disasters. I feel this could be revolutionizing to the capitalism system. Upon my return to Guelph, I was contacted by a company from New Zealand who made specialized storm drain inlet catch basins for various industries. They visited me at work and thanked me for my work in the Eramosa and asked if I would help them get in touch with PDI and even the municipal government to see about interest in doing trials for their debris catchers. I said I'd see what I could do. After all, I don't want rubbish getting into the river, as that would make my trips to clean it easier and I could enjoy paddling more. As I run the Guelph-wide live music listings website called musiclives.ca, I'd had a couple of opportunities to introduce the Lititrap idea to the president of the Guelph Downtown Business Association, Marty Williams. The next thing I know, Marty tells me the city and the DGBA spent money on 11 of these catch basins and are installing them all over downtown. This means that less and less of those cigarette butts that end up on the streets will end up in the river systems from Guelph. Globally, approximately 4.5 trillion cigarette butts, the biggest man-made ocean contaminant, are littered each year. Guelph is moving back towards the green mindset and hopefully setting a bar higher for other municipalities with this pilot project. On my next trip back to visit these new Irish friends this past summer, the campaign was still going strong. On my second last day there, the Irish High Courts ruled in favor of the Save Our Skibbereen campaign and squashed the developments for plans for RTP. RTP also withdrew their planning altogether. This was a win for small environmental campaign up against a major multinational big oil company. Rumors of my holding PDI accountable has echoed back from people I met in Toronto. I've recently been asked to meet an environmental bigwig in Spain named Jack Horner. I spoke at the Kiwanis Club and an environmental conference at Centre Wellington. I'm speaking with you now, and I'm scheduled to speak at the Aurora Adventures Club in the new year. And I must mention I was also featured in the Royal City Stories episode about influential Guelphites, which Rob just mentioned. All from doing what I not only needed to do to help heal myself, but because it was the right thing to do. I helped create some accountability for a company that has since began to set the bar higher for the industry. I've traveled to Europe, and there's more opportunity knocking to go back. I've helped my city make moves to stop cigarette butts from ending up in the Great Lakes. And with luck, I may be returning to Skibbereen with a film crew to shoot more footage on the matter, and it all started with a grassroots movement. my hashtag RIVERLOOT, setting a better example for my community. My time up here is up. I'll conclude my portion of the show. Thank you, Rob and Lisa, and to everyone who came out to MoMondays for this little gathering and to hear my story.